Hello, welcome to our learning community, Project Needs and Requirements, Finding Balance in Your Grant. I'm B.C. Echohawk, the Communications Coordinator for SAMHSA's Tribal TTA Center. On behalf of our Contracting Officer Representatives Maureen Madison and Jan Dunbar Cooper, and our Project Director Lori King, thank you all for joining us today. As always, we'll start our presentation in a good way after we take a moment to review our process. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available in the near future. Because we are recording, all lines will be muted to minimize outside noise. We hope you'll use the chat box for questions and comments throughout the session. Today's PowerPoint is available for download on the lower right side of the screen. Just left-click on the file and a Download File button will appear at the bottom of the box. Clicking that button will start the download. Finally, we appreciate you completing the brief participant survey you'll receive at the end of the session. This helps us better tailor these events to your needs. Our facilitators today are Task TTA Coordinator Josh Schuyler, along with Government Project Officer Michelle Carnes. We'll introduce today's guests in a moment, but first we'd like to open in a good way. Doing that for us today is Grantee Technical Assistant for our Native Connections TTA Center, Dave Braveheart. Dave?
Thank you, BC, and it is an honor to be able to do the opening for each and every one of you. So good morning and good afternoon to each and every one of you. Homadakapi Machante Washte, Nape Chuzapalo. I greet each and every one of you with a warm handshake from my heart. And at this time, I just want to invite you to close your eyes and to focus on your breath. Each day we are given the breath of life. And with my own breath, I will use my breath to play the Native American flute. And it's an honor to share this in a good way to each and every one of you. So hokahe. Go ahead and focus on your breath. And we'll give thanks for this day and this moment in our breath of life that we have. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Josh.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Welcome, everyone. My name is Josh Schuyler. I'm a member of the Oneida Nation. Currently, support Tribal Tech as a task lead and former TTA coordinator for the SAMHSA Tribal TTA Center. I've been working with Tribal Tech for going on a little over 5 years now, but supporting Indian country from my home city of outside Detroit for about 10 plus years. I'm going to introduce Michelle Carnes, who I believe a lot of you are already aware of and familiar with. She's a GPO for the Suicide Prevention Branch Center for Mental Health Services, SAMHSA. At this time, I'm going to talk through our intentions for today before I turn it over to Michelle to kick us off. All right, our intentions are to review compliance and its definition, role in grant funding, and boundaries, discuss the importance of creating a relationship with the GPO, discuss grantee successes in maintaining, creating cultural suitability within the Native Connections grant framework. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Michelle to kick us off and get started. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on this webinar. I'm really excited about this topic. I have worked with lots of grantees on how to make this stuff work for you, so I'm grateful to be here. And here's a question that I often ask my grantees, and we're going to talk about it now. If your Native Connections grant is unable to support the cost of something that you need for your program, what are other resources that you could explore to meet that need? And this could be things that you have done or things that you think that you might do. So for instance, for sustainability or other things that you might need that you just can't afford with your grant or that can't be covered. What are some other resources that come to mind that you have used or you could use to meet that need?
Hey, Michelle. I just had a question. I know that we talked about support for something in Native Connections, but also other projects. So I mentioned my experience. You know, I worked on the Circles of Care project, which worked closely with Native Connections. Typically, one thing that always came up, and I know we'll get to that a little bit later, was supporting food, but also transportation was something that we were unable to support at times, but also had to find creative ways. I didn't know if you had any comments or suggestions or some success stories to share to kick this off.
Sure. Things like transportation, like particularly if people are being taken to appointments and things like that, that is something that can be supported under Native Connections. You can buy vehicles with Native Connections funds. You have to go through particular steps to justify and explain what that vehicle is used for, but we've had grantees go through that process and get vehicles that were intended to be used for program, particularly around transporting youth to services. So that is a possibility. You can also give incentive cards to people, so those can be up to $30 a piece. And so for people who participated in the community readiness assessment, interviews, etc., gift cards are certainly an option, and you can buy those with your grant funds, and it's not uncommon for people to get gas cards and things like that because that's something that people need to get around. So there's some creative ways that you can actually get those things supported through Native Connections, but I think your thing about food is right on, and this was something that I did want to talk about on this webinar, that the official formula is $3 per person, and so what that means is that when you submit your invoice, there's an other box, and you put in that box if you spent $300 on food for an event, then you put 3 times 100 people is $300. That's $3 per person. Sometimes folks they partner with a local university that has a nutrition program or that just wants to donate funds and wants to help. So universities can be good for that. Also local grocery stores. We've had grocery stores donate food and you can hire people to cook the food for your event. So there's a couple ways that you can work that so that you get your needs met and still stay within the boundaries of what the grant's for.
Excellent. And Michelle, in my experience in the past as, I guess, a project coordinator, the gas cards were super beneficial for participation, because transportation was a barrier and issue in my community. Prior to my work in Circles of Care, but working alongside SAMHSA, we were using them for feedback, data collection, but it really helped to bring people in and support our various projects that were going on. But also another great point was partnerships. We had nutrition programs in the community whose task it was to cook food at certain times, and if we could think strategically about some of their goals and objectives for that project and partner with the project director, it helped alleviate some of the stress around the food, because trying to stretch $3 through a large group of people was sometimes challenging, but definitely the partnerships in the community was super helpful.
Definitely. Yep, completely agree. Okay, so we're going to move on to compliance. in terms of what this means in the Native Connections context, what is compliance? Well, it basically means that when you apply for a Native Connections grant or any federal grant, your notice of award becomes your legal document that explains what the requirements are, what the expectations are, and will outline for you what it is that you need to do over the course of your grant. So staying in compliance means meeting the stated expectations in that notice of award. Are requirements flexible? Well, if you've been a Native Connections grant for any length of time, then you've noticed that there is some flexibility. And so, yes, while there are things that you do have to do that are required, things like reports and submitting things into ERA and SPARs, as far as the requirements of your actual activities, there's a great deal of flexibility there. In terms of modifications, mostly what people become concerned about is making a budget modification, because it's one thing to be able to do an activity and it's another thing to be able to pay for it, as we were just mentioning. So it's good to know what you need to pay for, what's already in your budget that you can pay for, that's already approved. So it's really about deciding what's the distance between what you've already been approved for and what you want to change. And budget modifications are something that grantees do sometimes on an annual basis, but sometimes more frequently if needed. And those are submitted through ERA. And your GPO, as well as Holly Blake, who is your grants management specialist, although if you're cohort 3, it's Maria Martinez, they can provide you with guidance on how to make modifications to your budget. And then the last point is creating cultural relevance non-compliant. Not at all. It really is designed to be a culturally responsive grant. Now, we might need additional explanation. We might need you to help put it into context, because everyone here at SAMHSA doesn't necessarily have the same level of understanding and cultural competence. And so being able to demonstrate this to anyone, no matter how familiar they may be with tribes and tribal context, is really helpful. And so coming up with language to help put this into context and explain it, it helps us, it helps you, and we've seen really amazing requests be approved just because they were explained really, really, really well. And we're going to talk about an example of that in a moment. Before we do, there's a couple of things to keep in mind as a grantee that can be wonderful resources for you as you go through your grant process. So your funding opportunity announcement, or your FOA, this is what you responded to get your grant in the first place. But these are very important tools and helpful even after you become funded. And so, for instance, a good example is for Cohort 2 grantees, there's an Appendix D that's labeled Funding Restrictions. And these have lots of good information about things that are not okay to pay for and things that are okay to pay for. And so this has the language around incentives of $30. It has language about the food allowance and what you can do and what you can't do. For Cohort 3, it's the same. It's an appendix. It's Appendix C in the case of Cohort 3 grantees. So this is a wonderful resource for you, and I find that some of the most common questions we get are already in the FOA. So going back to the FOA can be a great resource for you. And as I said, your notice of award is really helpful. It has due dates in it. It has terms and conditions, things that you need to respond to. And so it just kind of lays out for you what the expectations are in your grant. And it also lets you know if you got carryover approved, etc. So these are really important pieces of information to have as a grantee. The second piece is SPARs, which we're also going to talk about today. SPARs can be a great, useful tool for you as well. I think grantees typically think of it as a reporting system that is just for monitoring and satisfying SAMHSA's appetite for data. But in fact, there's a lot of good things that you can do with SPARs, and one of our colleagues today is going to talk about that. One of the things that I encourage my grantees to do is to help connect the dots about the things you're spending your money on and the activities you're doing and what's listed in SPARs as a requirement. So for instance, in SPARS, there is a requirement or an indicator, the O1 indicator, which is for outreach. And so if you're required to report on outreach in your grant, then it's okay for you to spend money on things for outreach. Now recently HHS has posted that they won't pay for promotional items, and so that's put a bit of a wrench in the works for a lot of us. But what they will do is they will pay for things like pamphlets and flyers and posters, paper items. And so some of what I've been encouraging my grantees to do is to say, what about making paper placemats with resources on them that you could give to restaurants and they could use them at their tables? People could take them with them. You could also hire young people to do outreach if you want to go door to door and do canvassing and talking to people in person. That's considered outreach, and that's something that you report on in your grant. So that's completely justifiable, even in light of these limitations on promotional items. There are ways that you can use the fact that you report on outreach in SPARS to justify other kinds of spending. And then this last one is a really important one that I think that sometimes people aren't aware of. I think oftentimes our fiscal offices work with this more than we do, but it's good for us to be aware of it, and that is the 45 CFR 75. These are the uniform administrative requirements for federal grants. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a link in the chat box so that you can have a link to actually look at these requirements. These are really important and great and helpful to give some context around the ways that grants management may be making decisions. There are cost principles included in there. There's a whole list of things about, is this allowable, is this not? So just having some background on what your grants management specialist is using to make decisions can be really, really useful. So I share that with you just to have another tool in your toolbox. Okay. And so, as promised, we're going to talk about some examples to really ground what we're talking about. And so we've invited 2 Native Connections grantees to come speak with us today, and we're so grateful for their participation. They are really outstanding project directors who've done amazing things in their community. First, we have Ryan Martinez from the Nambe Pueblo, and he is a Cohort 1 grantee that became a Cohort 5, so that the Nambe Pueblo will have 10 years of Native Connections. We're really excited about that. And then we'll hear from Jasmine Desiderio, who works in the Thoreau community in Navajo. And Jasmine and I have worked together for several years in various capacities, and Jasmine's just incredible. So these are 2 of my most amazing stories, I think, from Native Connections for this topic. So we're real lucky that they're here with us today. So here's a little background about their programs themselves, and here's their mission statements, which are beautiful and guide all of the work that they do. So let's go ahead and start with Ryan, who's from the Nambe Pueblo there in New Mexico. Ryan has a special example to share that has to do with purchasing a yurt. It was the end of a fiscal year. They had unspent funds, and they came to the conclusion, we really need a yurt to help us provide the services that we want to do. How do we get this paid for? It's a big purchase. And Ryan did it successfully. So I'm very excited for Ryan to talk to you a little bit about his process. And we're going to kind of step through some of these questions here in terms of how did you come to the conclusion that you needed it, and then what did you do to actually make it happen? So Ryan, we would love to hear from you about this process for you, and I also have your request here in front of me so I can quote from it with some of these good language that you used.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, my name is Ryan Martinez, and kutohoha for having me. Thank you very much. I am a Nambe Pueblo tribal member, and we're located a little bit north of Santa Fe, New Mexico. I kind of came in a little bit late in the SAMHSA game. I came in at the end of year 4 of our Native Connections grant, and when I came in, one of my big things that I wanted to do was to try to figure out what the community needs were and how is our program meeting those needs, or how is it not meeting those needs. And one of the first conferences I had with Native Connections was in Albuquerque, and I believe it was a regional conference. And one of the things that I took away from it was they were talking about how do you create sustainability in year 5 of the grant. So we had left the meeting with kind of some better guidelines of kind of how we can improve our programs. But one of the things that stuck with me the most was the concept of sustainability. And for me, that's something that I'm very passionate about. And I think that Native American people in general kind of come from a lineage of being sustainable and stewards of the earth. And I knew that for me also, I come from a background of building. I've done construction, and I knew that there's a very therapeutic aspect of building a structure. So I kind of got the gears turning a little bit, and we talked about like possibilities of what our program could turn into. And at that point, I was just starting with Native Connections. So when we came back, we decided that one of the things we wanted to do was talk to the youth about what it was that they wanted. And after discussing with our youth here, we had a youth coalition who met once a week, every single week. And we talked to them about what do they need as far as things that can empower them as youth. And some of the things they wanted to do was they wanted to do some film stuff, they wanted to do music, they wanted to do art, but they felt like they didn't really have the right tools to do that. The space that we originally were meeting in was a 10 by 10 room that had offices with people who work in various departments all around it. So anytime that they showed up, there's people in their space. And so they kind of felt like they were a little bit neglected and not really very important, whether that was to as a tribal community or to the tribal leadership as well. So when I came in, my background is I'm a substance abuse counselor, and I worked with an organization that did experiential education. So we did things like hiking and climbing and camping and snowshoeing and all that type of stuff under the context of experiential education. So really kind of what that was and what we did with that was we knew that our treatment practices should be based in the belief that individuals can gain positive impact through guided experience and metaphoric messaging. So basically any program that we did had some type of metaphoric background depending on the needs of the clients. So I came from that background into kind of this whole realm of Native Connections, and I wanted to kind of transfer some of what I was already doing over because I saw the beneficial effects of experiential education and outdoor adventure therapy. So we decided to kind of gear our program towards that. And with that, one of the things that we knew was we had to meet the needs of the community, and the youth are a very important part of the community, and often they're a part of the community that gets neglected the most. So we talked to the youth and sat down with them and kind of brainstormed some ideas, and we knew that through SAMHSA, it is a non-construct grant, so you can't build a structure. But I knew that one of the things that we definitely needed to do was figure out how do we come up with a space for the youth. And our tribe, one of the issues that we have here is we're limited on spaces. We don't have a ton of places for people who are even working here to really be. So everybody's kind of checkerboarded throughout the tribal buildings. So we knew that if we could potentially secure a space for the youth, this would be such a huge leap for them being able to meet the needs of what they wanted to bring back to the community. So with that in mind, like the whole concept of sustainability that we had, we're like, well, why don't we try to make our experiential education program fully sustainable and sustainable in all aspects of life? So that includes individually, culturally, everything really. So with the space, we knew that, or I knew that with the yurt, you don't necessarily have to have any type of foundation. that is permanent, which seemed to be kind of one of the issues. So when we thought like maybe we could do a yurt, like because it's kind of like a tent, so it's not super permanent. So I pitched this idea to Michelle, my GPO, about what if we did this thing, and from there she referred us to the finance folks for SAMHSA, and we kind of got the ball rolling there. So we approached it from that perspective of like, hey, we want to do this thing, and we kind of felt out how that kind of sat with our finance people, and we did get denied probably about 2 or 3 times before I was like, well, it's kind of hard to justify something that we're doing in just the context of what it is for face value. And really with the yurt, what our mission was we wanted the yurt to be a tool. Kind of like how I said that construction has this very therapeutic nature to it. I thought that a yurt would be awesome because it is very accessible for youth who have never built anything before, because you're not having to do a whole lot to pitch the yurt, to make this space. So I knew that they could do it. And at the same time, I knew that it would provide some really cool metaphoric background if we used it as an experiential education curriculum. So from there, we decided that we wanted to create this curriculum that focused on sustainability in all walks of life. So with that, we're trying to utilize those aspects throughout our program, but specifically with the yurt project in general. So we knew that this thing could be this tool that could help to really empower the youth to realize that they can do amazing things that adults typically can't think that they can do. And we wanted this to be youth-led. And part of the reason is because a lot of times programs talk about having like youth leadership and have conferences around youth leadership. But at the same time, we facilitate those as adults and don't really get a whole lot of the input from the youth. And we're like, what if we had this be something that the youth were invested in, and that really went towards benefiting them in the long run? So we talked to Michelle. We sent her kind of a draft of what the therapeutic background of the yurt project was, and how we can move forward with it without it having to be a permanent structure. And it kind of went well with our curriculum because we're trying to make as little of an impact on the earth as possible. So if we created this structure that was not concreted into the ground, but it was able to be moved from place to place, we're like, hey, this could work. And from there, this whole project kind of snowballed into this really amazing, beautiful project that we're still working on today, but we have partners that came in from all over to incorporate film and to incorporate different elements of education to really give these youth who are going to participate in this build college credit and high school credit and things that are really like solid and hard for them to be able to take with them into their future. So that's kind of how the yurt project got started, and yeah, like it was really kind of this unique experience because I think we saw the value in it, and I think that we talked a lot with our GPO about it, and they saw the value in it, but it's hard to explain a dynamic project like this in this really like finite context. So once we knew that our GPO kind of had the vision as well as us, we decided to put it into writing and to send it to our finance people and really kind of allow them to see that this is just more than a project. It really is a tool to move our program and our youth forward and give them something that they need to really feel empowered. So yeah, that's kind of one of the main things. But with that context too, like our program is an experiential program. We do outdoor adventure therapy, and we're actually going for our accreditation through the AEE, which is Association for Experiential Education. So we do things like kayaking, we do hiking, we do snowshoeing, we do camping, And soon here, we've already gotten started on this project, but we're looking at actually doing the pitch of the yurt this April, or starting this April. So yeah, that's kind of our background and a little bit about what we did. And I think that this whole experience was probably something that was pretty unique in general, but really amazing to kind of see the support that SAMHSA gave us and our GPO and finance people gave us in the end. So yeah, thank you for having me, y'all, and it's great to kind of get to share these things with you and kind of give a little bit of insight into what other people are doing, because I know that helped us as an organization being able to see what other people have done, and just really how creativity can kind of come into the process of deciding what you're going to do or what the needs of your community are. So again, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Amazing description. Thank you for walking us through that. I'm seeing a question from some of my colleagues just asking about how film is going to be integrated into your project, and they suggested perhaps it would reflect the tracking the progress of the yurt itself being built. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about the role of film.
Awesome, yeah, and like I said, this project is really dynamic, and one of the things that we knew we had to do, since we couldn't do construction or anything of that sort, we had to be really creative about how we went about doing this. So from the beginning, we knew that partnerships was going to be the way to make this happen, and we really wanted to create as many partnerships, but like as many partnerships that are really in line with what this yurt project was going to do. And for the Association for Experiential Education, this will actually be the first time that this curriculum has ever been done under them. So they're really kind of excited about us doing it. And we knew that it was really had the potential to be this special thing. So we had the random opportunity to meet George R.R. Martin. He came to do some filming here on our tribe, and I got to spend the day driving him around on my four-wheeler and kind of showing him Nambe, and we got to talking about his work and some of the things that he's done, and a few of those things are he has a nonprofit here in New Mexico called Stagecoach Foundation, and they provide programs in youth and at-risk communities with experience in film. So they do workshops where they'll bring out different elements of film and movie making in general, and they'll kind of teach the youth or the adults or whoever how to film, how to edit, how to make props, how to do lighting, like all the whole gamut. And I started talking to him about what this project was, and he really liked the idea of sustainability. So he's like, hey, why don't you connect with our film group here, and they can kind of fill out what they can do to help in this project. So we had a meeting with Stagecoach Foundation and basically broke down the yurt project to them, and just like our whole project in general and our program. And they really loved the idea, and they said, why don't we not just do a film collaboration on this? Why don't we teach your youth how to make a documentary? And why don't we teach them how to do all of the elements in-house? That way they can create this really beautiful thing, showcasing whatever it is they wanted to showcase. And again, we went back to the youth, said, hey, like, what do you want this thing to be? Because now we have this group who's willing to kind of support us in these different ways, and they want to teach you guys how to document this. So the youth decided that they wanted to focus their documentary on sustainability in all walks of life, which that's kind of what we apply to our project or to our program. So they're going to be filming organizations, whether it's mental health or whatever, who kind of support the idea of sustainability. And at the same time, they're going to be showcasing them building this structure. So yeah, that's kind of how film was incorporated into this. So from there, from Stagecoach, we actually got 4 other media companies who were really interested in kind of helping to document this. So From Stagecoach, it went to Native Hope Media, Really Indian Pictures, and then Little Globe came on board too, they all kind of do nonprofit type of work in New Mexico. So I think connecting and building those partnerships and seeing what you all have access to wherever it is that you are, there's a lot of really amazing nonprofits out there who are willing to kind of support some of the things that can be used as ways to empower youth. So that's kind of how that all came about.
Amazing.
Oh, and for those of you who don't know who George R.R. Martin is, he's the writer and director of Game of Thrones. So he actually lived here in Santa Fe, and he's a very nice man and kind of really been influential in our project. So.
Yeah, NBD, right?
Totally, yeah, for sure.
Right? Oh, just like, the person who created Game of Thrones. No big deal.
Yeah, totally.
Wow. That's really spectacular. So I am so happy that you explained all of this. It's awesome. And then just from being your project officer, I think, one of the things that I observed was how, because you mentioned that this got sent back to you a couple times, and I remember very much about this process, how willing you were to really understand what SAMHSA needed from you in order to say yes to this. And you were so responsive. I mean, you were really on top of it, and you came back with really beautiful language to explain it. And I'll just give a little bit of a taste here. Part of your explanation said, the yurt that Nambe is looking to purchase is part of a multifaceted experiential education youth prevention project that will allow the youth to develop skills in different areas critical to empowerment and resilience. Part of the metaphor for this project is to be as environmentally, physically, and resourcefully sustainable as humanly possible. And you went on to explain that it is a temporary structure. It is non-permanent, which we found out was really important. It couldn't be a permanent structure, and yurts are not. And as you did the cost breakdown, it was almost like you could hear SAMHSA asking the question, why do you need that? Because you explain, we picked this particular model with regards to the size of the groups that we're working with. We regularly have 12 to 15 youth at our coalition meetings and tend to bring in more people, as well as offer more events and trainings. You explained why you needed Arctic insulation. It helps to sustainably support the climate here. It's a less, which reduces the need for costly and less environmentally friendly alternative heat sources. You make constant reference to sustainability to say if we do this kind of roof, we will it will allow us to go longer periods of time without having to make roof replacements. You do such a good job of explaining what this is. You don't take for granted at all that someone understands what a yurt was. I certainly learned a lot about, I didn't know that much about them until I became your project officer. So now I know a lot more about them and what they do. And you also made sure that they were accessible. You talked about the need for elders to be able to get into the structure. And so, being able to get wood to build a ramp so that if someone was in a wheelchair, they could get into the space. And I just want to also mention that one of the things that Ryan did as part of this experiential program that he does is he had the youth make these bottle cap necklaces, and they're really cool. They look so awesome, and it's jewelry that's made from bottle caps, and they were put into out into areas like in nature, and so it encouraged people to go. It was like a scavenger hunt, and it encouraged people in the community to go out and take walks and look around and see if they could find these bottle cap necklaces. And when they found them, they were able to keep them, and they would take pictures of themselves and post them on Instagram, and that was how they got entered into, a contest. And there's a amazing museum and an experiential kind of museum in Santa Fe called Meow Wolf. And Meow Wolf found out about these bottle cap necklaces, and now they sell the bottle cap necklaces in their gift shop, which is now an opportunity for this program to have some income, which will allow them to do even more activities. So it's just an amazing example of how partnerships become so key, and if you get connected with the right folks, there's some really extraordinary things that can happen. So I just think Nambe is such an extraordinary example of that, and as your project officer, it's just a real pleasure for me to watch all of this happen. It's really awesome, and I'm grateful that we've been able to get as much SAMHSA support for you as we have.
Thanks, Michelle. I think that SAMHSA has been critical in this program and kind of moving things forward, and also too, I think that like one of the big takeaways from that first experience was not to be scared to ask questions. I mean, I think a lot of people would kind of see a yurt as something that's ridiculous to buy, but I think if you have intention and there's really like evidence-based practices that kind of support your intentions, I think you can really make a lot of really unique, cool things happen. So yeah, I think that's one of the big takeaways from us, is to kind of allow yourself to be creative and think out the box and ask questions if you're not sure. I mean, asking never hurts. So
Yep.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Ryan and Michelle, this is Josh. I just had a comment on this, and it's great listening. I didn't know, on my own end what exactly a yurt was, so some of those questions were going through my head. But I also think this is a great opportunity or highlight for the relationship between the GPO and the grantee, that there was barriers that are encountered, and we have those in Indian country. We know the importance of being flexible, but this is a great example to highlight of, you and Ryan, you and the community, Michelle and the community working together to find a solution and being creative and working towards getting that approval, and I think that oftentimes we encounter barriers that can kind of delay our progress, but in this case it really led to something sustainable, from the documentary to the structure to the process and even to the curriculum being developed and working towards evidence-based practice. So I think it's an awesome example of building those partnerships internally and externally, and congratulations. It was great to hear about this effort.
Thank you. I think too, for people who don't know what a yurt is, just Google it. they're pretty cool structures, but it is a traditional Mongolian structure. So we took that into fact too, that it doesn't come from our culture. It's similar to buildings on our culture, but very different at the same time. So as part of being sustainable, we wanted to make sure we did it in a good way, so we were able to hook up with a Mongolian metal band who came to New Mexico recently. Actually, part of the reason they came was for this project, but we were able to bring them to the land that the yurt's going to be on, and we did a cultural exchange where our cultural leaders came and did a cleansing and blessing of the land, and at the same time, like, the Mongolian guys were able to kind of speak on what the importance of the yurt was in Mongolia, and kind of like how they were happy to bring these two cultures that are on other sides of the world together to make this project happen. So it was a really cool experience, and yeah, so Google a yurt if you don't know what it is.
And I put the spelling down in the chat. It's Y-U-R-T, in case you're not familiar. All right. Fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. And we'll have another opportunity for questions as well later on. So if you're listening and you think of more questions or things that you want to check in with Ryan about, we'll have an opportunity to ask, or you can put them in the chat box as well. Okay. So let's see here. Do we want to move on to this yet? No, I don't think that we do, but we will in a minute. Okay, I'm going to move back to this. So I want to talk to my colleague Jasmine, who is the project director for the Thoreau project in Navajo for Native Connections. And what I would like Jasmine to talk about, it's a little different than what we had Ryan just speak about, is how some of the requirements that SAMHSA asks you to do as part of your grant, how those have come in very useful and been helpful to you, not just as oh, thank you for moving the slide. I appreciate that. Not just as something that SAMHSA needs or, as a monitoring thing, but that it helped benefit your project. And there were two examples in particular that you mentioned. One was a situation you had in a crisis situation at Thoreau where the policies and the protocols came in really handy. And then you wanted to talk about an example with SPARS as well. So we're excited to hear from you, Jasmine, and thank you for being with us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine. I am the project director out in the Thoreau community. The title of the project is called The Healing Project. And I want to talk to you today about some of the, challenges and barriers that we faced in our communities and how SAMHSA and Michelle, our GPO, has helped us through that. First off, I do want to mention that some of the requirements at the beginning of the grant, we're in cohort 2, so at the beginning of the grant, some of the requirements that they would ask for were like SPARS, and back then it was TRAC, now it is SPARS, and making sure you keep track of every activity that you're doing because it's going to go into the annual story, and then you have the semi-programmatic report. It seemed like every month there was some type of report due, and it was kind of overbearing and overwhelming when the grant first started in year 1. But now I'm very thankful that all the requirements that are set by SAMHSA, because it has helped our grant tremendously. So I'm going to give you an example. In Thoreau, there's not very much space, business spaces. So the community center is leasing a building from the McKinley County Commissioners. So the McKinley County, the commissioners had to approve it. And before they could approve any lease agreements or a partnership with the program, we had to generate some type of report or an analysis of what our program does, how we are doing it, and the impact to the community. And it wasn't just how many lives are you saving. We couldn't put a number on that. What's the cost of saving life? And that was hard for us because we were in, we were in suicide prevention. So what we had to do was get creative and look at all the reports that we had to submit to SAMHSA and develop a cost-benefit analysis. There was an impact on if the community, the county commissioners and their programs that they have set up for crisis interventions were to provide the services in our community of Thoreau, how much would it cost them? What are we saving them? What are the costs that we're saving just for the crisis intervention, as well as the police officers, the social services, the counselors? We took that all into account because that's what we do. That's where our program is. We've seen and identified that there's a gap in our community and the services out in the town closest to us in Gallup. So we use the reports that are required for the for SAMHSA, the semi-programmatic reports, our annual stories, and we've changed that into developing and modifying it into a cost-benefit analysis, and we started submitting monthly and quarterly reports to the county commissioners, and they agreed that what we were doing has a great impact in our community. We were supposed to provide in our community at least $36,000 worth of impact that we're saving the county commissioners. And within 6 months, based on all the activities that we do in our community, we were already at $40,000. So they finally realized that we are doing what we said we were doing in the community, and it's being done. And they did accept our reports because they are received by SAMHSA, and SAMHSA receives those exact same reports. So they were in aligning with what we do and saying that we do accept what you are doing, and we want to continue our partnership. So that helped us in a way, especially the SPARS. One of the biggest things I want to stress is how important SPARS is, because it keeps track of all the activities that you're doing. It aligns with your strategic action plan. It aligns with your budget. Everything that you're doing, SPARS should be a part of it. Every activity that you're going to be planning, looking at the budget, always go back to SPARS and the IPP indicators that you need to look at. That's my biggest thing is when we're planning any type of event, like an outreach or a program with partnership with another program that we're slowly developing our networking and our partnership and collaboration with a new program, we start noting that this is an IPP indicator. So when I have interactions with people, automatically I'm in SPARS mode. I'm like, okay, I've already met this person, or this is a new meeting. How many new people are here? Because that helps us, or it helps me. It provide those numbers to SAMHSA because it does show and it supports your program. It especially does that for ours. And we use our reporting, our annual stories, and our SPARS as a way to express ourselves. And that's what we highlight on, is it's our opportunity to let SAMHSA know that what we're doing and how we're impacting our community, but it also gives us our own voice on different type of unique opportunities that we have in our area, that we're overcoming challenges and barriers and different types of activities, and doing what we said we were going to do. And an example of that is the crisis protocol. So in our community, we're situated in Navajo Eastern Agency, and in our area, we have a crisis response team that was developed by another program. And what we've done is when we started receiving funding from SAMHSA, we wanted to integrate the crisis response team in our community and work more closely with that program to ensure that our community was involved in the planning and the monthly meetings and the reportings, just so we were aware of what was happening in our community and how we could develop our own crisis protocol or something that was unique to us, because we, in our community, we're considered checkerboard, which means that we have different spots, patches of Navajo land, county, state, federal. So depending on where you're at, you'll get different types of services. And we wanted to bypass the jurisdiction issues and collaborate with other programs to ensure that there was an effective protocol in place for our community, so that nobody is left behind or nobody receives the services that they need at the time of crisis. And I want to share a story with you that happened a while back. I believe it was a year ago or a couple months ago. We had received reports that we had an individual die by suicide in our community, and we were receiving phone calls at the office, we were receiving messages, social media messages, emails about what had happened, and it was just hearsay. It was here and there. Nobody really knew the specific details or where this had happened or what's going on. So as the project director, this is something that I would be on right away, that we need to get those services out there, we need to help the family, but I left it. I kind of stood back to see what would happen if we weren't here. How would our community work? Is our protocol in place? Have we done our job to connect the gaps that we have seen in our community? And I gave it maybe an hour or two, and I sent out the email to the schools, and I had asked them, we've received reports that there was a suicide. We want you to be vigilant and on high alert, and be aware that some of these kids may be related to this individual that had died by suicide. And immediately I received a response. Don't worry about it. We took care of it. We've already contacted the crisis response team. We contacted and set up follow-up services for the people that have been identified in our school, at the high school, that are related closely to this individual. And what we called the actual sibling of the individual was attending the middle school. So the middle school called us after receiving my email and said, don't worry about it. We already contacted. We're working with the school counselors at the high school. We're working with the local resources in our area. We've already have the follow-ups in place for the student. We have the school counselor here at the middle school setting up a treatment plan. So when she returns, we're going to be monitoring her and making sure that she's okay, and also called in the follow-ups for home visits to ensure that the family is taken care of. And that was amazing. Like, I couldn't, I almost cried I was so happy and proud of everybody working together, working collaboratively, and knowing who to call. And the protocol wasn't truly ours because it was developed by another program, but what we've done and the legwork that we've put in our community, because it was so unique, actually worked. So we were able to connect our programs, our stakeholders, to programs and make sure that they have the contact information and reevaluate the type of response that we get within our schools or within our own community, and that was amazing. So that's a success story that I want to share with you about the reason why policies and protocols are set up and the effectiveness, and if you are willing to do the legwork and work hard at developing those new partnerships and networking, because it does take a lot to network. It's not just going to a meeting and attending as part of your job, but actually truly networking and understanding what different programs do and how can you use their programs and work together to provide different types of services within your community. And for the youth especially, how can we do that? Because we're in the rural area of New Mexico, and we have a lot of resources that are outside of our town. So we have to kind of get creative on how we're going to work collaboratively to get immediate services to these individuals during crisis situations before the professionals come in, like the law enforcement or the EMTs or counselors. So those are two stories that I wanted to share with you all about the benefits of reporting and supporting your program and how it will and is and should be seen as supporting your program and your voice, basically, and that shows, and it should show in your reports, especially your annual stories, and also the benefits of having, making those connections in your area when you have developed a crisis policy and protocol for your community.
Awesome. Thank you, Jasmine. That's fantastic. If folks have questions for Jasmine or Ryan, you can put those in the chat box. We're going to move on to questions in a more formal way in just a moment. But if there's anything that you've got burning that you really want to ask, this is a good time. I can see we've got a comment from BC saying, yes, creating effective networks requires hard work and consistent maintenance. Very true. Okay. So just as a way for us to better understand some of the things that are on your mind as far as the kinds of creative solutions that you're thinking about in your community or potential activities that you may want to do, or things that you're doing now that you are trying to think outside the box about how to get those things supported. Talk to us a little bit about what kinds of program costs you need help supporting. When you hear these stories and you apply them to yourself and you think about, well, that's kind of like what we were thinking about to do this or that, or gosh, you know, it would be great if we could just have like some money to do X, Y, Z. What are those kinds of things? If you can put those in the chat, it's great to hear about what kinds of costs those might be, especially as a GPO. I might be able to give you some thoughts on some creative ways to do that.
Hey, Michelle, I see that BC's typed in a question, but I had one that kind of came to mind from experience working in the community. You mentioned before promotional materials and kind of the changes around that. You know, I was in a community that utilized, we're collecting data, and what they were doing was they developed kind of like, well, I guess, a campaign. They had the metal stakes in it, and they had information about their program. It says something to the effect of, I support suicide prevention, or what it was really designed to do was raise their community readiness around issues. So all these signs in the community had that. Would that be an example of something that could potentially be purchased depending on how you wrote it up or approached your GPO?
Yeah, I mean, I think something like signs, I've definitely gotten the impression that things like pamphlets and flyers are still very much appropriate. So that seems to me like something that a GPO could ask about and see if that's a possibility. We are fortunate that we are now meeting with grants management on a monthly basis, and we're taking these particular questions and presenting them to her to get some conversation going. And we as GPOs can help explain and give some context, which is why it's really great to get the descriptions from grantees so that we can communicate on your behalf. So that would be a perfect question, I think, for us as project officers to be able to present that to grants management and say, what do you think about creating signs? Would that be considered outreach? Is that something that is okay? I think that the promotional materials thing, it does have some examples in them, and so there are things like conference lanyards, conference bags, T-shirts, mugs, stress balls, things like that. So I don't think that the signs you're describing fall into the same category as what I'm getting the impression the promotional items limit is. So my inclination is that that would probably be covered, but we will definitely ask, and that would be the kind of thing we could get back to a grantee about.
Perfect.
Jasmine, there was a great question brought up. I'm sorry. Did you want to add to that?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I think you're going in the same direction I was headed.
All right. So there was a great question brought up by BC to Jasmine about where the crisis response model where you got that from, Jasmine, and how you applied that to your community. If you can give us some background on that.
Okay, sure. So the crisis response team was developed by our local Indian Health Services hospital, so IHS in Crown Point. They have an MSPI grant that modeled or adapted and modified the post-vention crisis response team. And what had happened is they developed their team, and about a couple months later, we finally received the Notice of Award for SAMHSA Native Connections Grant. And because they had already implemented and developed that crisis response, and at that time they were only suicide crisis response. So they heard of our award, and they contacted us, and we started talking and developing partnerships on how we would be able to work together, because we are within Eastern Agency and that's within their jurisdiction. So after we had talked to them about MSPI the acronym stands for Methamphetamine Suicide Prevention Initiative, and that's another grant that is, I guess, related to suicide prevention. And in the area, in our area, we have, like I said, the jurisdiction issue, and because Thoreau does lie within Eastern Agency under the Navajo Nation, we wanted to collaborate our efforts of suicide prevention to reach all of Navajo accurately, effectively, because we wanted to bypass the whole state Navajo County issue, because depending on where you're at in our area, if you call 911, they'll ask for your specific address, and if you are on state land, they'll call state police. If you're on Navajo, you have to wait for the Navajo Nation police, but if you're in county land, they call and you receive the county sheriff. So that issue in and of itself was so difficult to bypass that we decided that we're just going to go ahead and talk to and adapt the crisis response team within Eastern Agency, and they were able to tell us that because we are on Navajo, that they would help us because that's their service unit, and we just decided that we were going to adapt it for our area and our community by reaching out to those other people who make decisions in our area, such as the captain for the New Mexico State Police, the captain for the sheriff's office, and the lieutenant for Crown Point area, Eastern Crown Point Navajo Nation Police District, and we let them know that we want to be sure that they understand that we have this crisis response team involved. If they are called on scene for anywhere in Thoreau, that they would understand that if it was a crisis event or crisis situation pertaining to suicide, that this team would be called out and they would work collaboratively to be sure that these individuals receive the services that they need. So that's one of the changes that we had to do to meet the needs of our community. And at the same time, we also worked with the high schools to have a direct contact with a crisis response team, because the way it was set up was you had to have one contact person in the community that would talk directly with the director of the crisis response team so that the correct, accurate information is relayed and shared with everyone. So we actually made that modification because one contact person wouldn't be sufficient for our community. But that's how we were able to address and modify the crisis response team that are in our area that was developed by the MSPI project out of the IHS service unit. I hope I explained that right.
That was very detailed. Thank you. That was amazing. Fantastic. So I want to go back to the issue of food. It looks like we may have some questions coming in, which we're happy to have. So please continue to type your questions. There's, just as I said before, there's sometimes partnerships with universities, grocery stores, nutrition programs. There's a lot of grant programs out there under the National School Lunch Act, commodity assistance, summer food service through USDA, school breakfast programs, special supplemental nutrition program, WIC. There's emergency food assistance. I mean, there's several different ways to get in touch with food provision. So definitely encourage you to partner as needed, or even go after these grants yourself if possible. So just a good thing to think about if you really want to ensure that you have food support for your program. Let's see. I haven't seen any questions come in, but certainly if folks have things that come to mind, or even if you have examples that you'd like to share with the group, we'll be glad to call those out for you if you want to share them in the chat box.
Perfect. Michelle, I see a couple people were starting to type in there, but it brought to mind just my experience as a project coordinator working in the community and the issue around food. My project I was working on in the past didn't have funds for food, and the timing space was an issue, and we weren't able to develop or build a yurt, although it's a great example of being able to work around some barriers. But I remember the timing of when we scheduled our events, where it was a Thursday afternoon is when we had time set aside that allowed us to have the space. And the Wednesday before that, there was a healthy community cooking class. I can't remember exactly, but I believe it was diabetes prevention or community wellness. And they knew we had these restrictions, so we were able to share this information with them. And what they did was we were able to cook more food and have it for the next day for us to be able to use for our event. So it's kind of an example or a sample of a partnership, sharing the data and information, communication between grants and projects to be able to come up with a creative solution to one of the issues we face, because it was definitely a barrier depending on the project and the community. So I definitely urge communities to open up the lines of communication, because there may be communities or other grants that have goals and objectives that need to be met, and they may have some ways to be able to creatively help or find solutions to some of these barriers that come up in our grants and projects.
Wow, that diabetes example is really awesome. That's great. It's like, that's wonderful. Like, how lovely to have these leftovers that you can heat up and eat the next day. Like, that is like beautiful. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was a while back. It also went along the lines too with healthy eating. So we were able, one of our goals was to provide healthy food to a lot of the projects. It was something that kind of transitioned when I was along for the ride. So it kind of met with the overall goals and vision for the Urban Community Center I worked at. So it was kind of a win-win, you know, in the face of some of the barriers we have and it exists in the community. So that just popped into mind. We were sharing examples of sharing information and sharing data and being able to establish partnerships, you know, external partnerships, but some of those internal partnerships are right there under our nose. And it's important for us to be able to work outside those silos, much like Jasmine and Ryan in their examples.
Yeah, you just reminded me of another grantee of mine, the Shinnecock grantee up in New York. They have traditional foods activities are integrated into their grant program, and so kind of like the experiential learning that Ryan explained, they have a lot of gardening and growing food as part of their program, and so they're able to, for instance, like the $3 per person, you know, you could get rice and some other things that you may not be growing but that you might need in order to make meals, and you can harvest the food that you've grown and cook meals from that as part of your program, and then the $3 could go towards, you know, other things that you may not be growing from scratch. So there's some really creative solutions out there that I think strengthen the program, and Shinnecock has certainly done that with their traditional foods program as part of their Native Connections grant. Yeah, Blossom, that's, yeah.
Michelle, at this time I don't see any more questions popping in or any comments, but then the comment that also came up is when I haven't dealt specifically with the SPARS data, but I understand about collecting data for projects can sometimes be daunting or kind of seem like a check-the-box task. And in Jasmine's example, she shared how she utilized this information, how important it was, and then collaboration. You know, we have so many reports that we're on the hook for, you know, with our projects and with our partners in the community. It's a pretty good example of being able to combine this information and see if it fit, and to be able to kind of work smarter, not harder, to take that approach. So I also like the part about how important the data was to the community. You know, I think that this data and information we collect is wrote into our project, but it's also an opportunity for us to show leadership what we've accomplished, show the youth in the community what we've accomplished, then provide general updates to some of our supervisors in the community, because oftentimes we have these projects like Native Connections, like Circles of Care, and other grants, and people in the community are wondering, you know, what's going on and what progress has been made towards some of these issues. And using that data is a great way of being able to share information on what the projects have been able to accomplish and what they're working on.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, I thank everyone for jumping on and joining us for this conversation. I know I learned a lot from both Jasmine and Ryan, and also Michelle, about everything that goes on within Native Connections and creative ways, moving past some of our barriers. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to a colleague, BC Echohawk, to close us out in a good way.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. And again, I do also thank Michelle for joining us. It was a pleasure to have the voice of SAMHSA on the line to give us some, you know, definitive answers or helpful answers that will hopefully help you in your goals with your grant. Additionally, Ryan and Jasmine, I can't thank you enough. It sounds like you guys are doing some pretty incredible work and showing what can be the results of partnerships and communication both within your community and with the programs that are there. All of our presenters and Michelle have agreed that if you have any questions that you would like to ask them, you're more than welcome to contact them, and their information is here. So this was the first of our learning communities for this program year, and we look forward to joining you again in a couple months. We will be putting together some more ideas for learning communities this year. You will be getting a survey which should open as soon as we close out of this, but we also may follow up with an email. We hope you will respond to that survey, because the topics that will that we look forward to providing you come from you and come from your ideas, and we would love to have a better idea of what will help you down the road with your programs and behavioral wellness in your community.